I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am on the traditional territories of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. I pay tribute to their legacy and the legacy of all First Peoples of Canada with respect and gratitude. I choose to take the time to reflect on the meaning of respect and the responsibility I share for the sustainability of these lands and how I can do my part to ensure that Indigenous peoples across Canada and the lands they were forced to share are centered in every aspect of the work that I do. I believe that we all have a responsibility to not only acknowledge the grounds on which we are privileged to live and to work, but to also continue to grow our learning of Indigenous histories and realities. With reverence and deep respect, I honor the original inhabitants of the land. I share responsibility to restore relationships with the caretakers of this land, based in peace, friendship, and trust. Through my commitment to reconciliation, partnership, and understanding. I would like to take a few moments to introduce our agenda for our time together. This is a guideline of the areas we will cover, and again, there will be space for questions. So I encourage folks, if there's anything that comes up for you, feel free to pop that into our chat. We're going to start by going back and defining what is stress, maybe more so revisiting what is stress. From there, we're going to explore the signs and symptoms, as well as learn some strategies and tools that we can use to not only cope with stress, but to cope with our overall wellness. From the stability that we're able to create from that, we're going to determine how we can create what's next. From there, we're going to explore how we can create a safe space to engage in collective care. Lastly, we're going to revisit some key points and some key takeaways, and then invite questions. So open the floor to any thoughts and questions that folks might have. So that is what to expect today during our webinar. So what is uncertainty? We've come together today to discuss and explore uncertainty, the ways that it can manifest in our thoughts, in our emotions, and our physical body, and how to cope with it for ourselves, for our peers, for our colleagues. Perhaps what has drawn you to the space today is your current experience in moving through the unknown. It is likely that we have experienced some type of uncertainty in the past, or are currently moving through something that is unknown, or will in the future. If we recall the impact of the pandemic, it was surrounded by a lot of unknown. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know how things would evolve or how things would change. We didn't know when it was going to end. Sometimes we were kind of like bombarded with a lot of information, right? And that might have been helpful for some folks and maybe not so helpful for some other folks. There have also been changes within international education and visa access, which has also created uncertainty of what this will mean for the future, as well as what more changes might be expected. The unknown can bring up a lot of emotions and discomfort. It can be an experience that can evoke stress, fear, or loss. And today we're going to look at how can we find the positive, the opportunity, and what we can gain during uncertain times. We know as human beings, the unknown can bring up a lot of discomfort because we crave certainty. We crave the predictable. So the unknown can create stress by not having access to this concrete information. So today we're going to explore how can we create certainty and how can we create predictability so that we can provide ourselves with access to that stability. So what is stress? What creates stress, or what is a stressor, is unique to all of us. We know that stress is a natural protective response to a threat that is present within our lives. This reaction can show up within our emotions, within our thoughts, or physically within our bodies. We have all experienced stress to a various degree, right? And it can create changes in nearly every system of the body, right? And I think that really can speak to just how impactful stress can be. Stress can be the feeling of being unable to cope with mental or emotional pressure. And again, these changes can influence how we feel as well as how we behave. There can be different types of stress. So when I mentioned that we've all experienced some type of stress, that doesn't necessarily mean only experiences of stress that are draining, right? That also includes that type of stress that is really energizing and almost action focused. Eustress is motivating and exciting. That is the type of stress that can really mobilize us into action. It can leave us with a sense of confidence and create a sense of empowerment because it also aligns with our coping and our resources. So in the face of our stressor, we know that we have the capabilities to navigate the stressor that we're faced with and be successful. This type of stress can propel us forward and it can create a focus to our energy. When faced with the unknown or the uncertain, for some folks, that might create eustress, right? They might feel energized and excited when within this space. So unlike eustress, distress doesn't feel so good. It can feel unpleasant. It can be draining and cause us to be stuck or immobile. The duration of distress can be short or it can be long. If you've ever had a situation where you've had to experience a stressful situation for an extended period of time, and then at the end, once things become resolved, you get sick, most likely you were navigating distress. That was it. Another big difference with distress is that it is beyond our resources to cope. So that can be a factor that tips the balance. Unlike the confidence we feel when we're experiencing eustress, where we know we have the capabilities to navigate our stressor, we might not be feeling that same confidence or lack the knowledge or tools to cope with the stressor we're facing. As we touched on earlier, stress can impact all the systems of the body, right? It can be quite an impactful experience. This slide focuses on the cognitive and the physical manifestations of stress. When we're experiencing a high level of stress or a sense of overwhelm from our stressors, it can affect our memory, our ability to make decisions, and our body can disconnect us from our internal experience as a form of protection. In response to extreme stress, we might experience dissociation as another protective mechanism to shield us from further physical, psychological, or emotional harm. That brings us to emotional indicators of stress. So symptoms are internal and help us observe what we might be experiencing within ourselves. These signs invite us to notice the experience of stress in others and can provide cues or clues on what the stress level might be like for the folks who are around us. They can also be useful prompts to help us check in with how we're really doing, right? And also be prompts for us to check in on the well-being of others and the folks around us. To tie everything together before we move on, I wanted to spend some time talking about the window of tolerance. This concept focuses on the optimal zone for us to function in everyday life. So when we're operating within this zone, we can manage and cope with our emotions. We might find that what we're able to hold or tolerate is very large, and that what it takes to kind of throw us off balance or to trigger us is very different. Maybe it's not a lot that can necessarily throw us off or cause an emotional reaction. we can see that when we are in our optimal zone and it is wide, we are feeling empowered even when faced with a stressful situation. It can be difficult to regulate or respond to our emotions when this zone becomes more narrow. When we're stressed, this can be a factor that causes our window of tolerance to shrink and affect what our capacity to handle stress is like. What I want us to focus on within this visual is when our optimal zone is more narrow, just how much we pop in and out of it, which can really capture how much emotional dysregulation or emotional imbalance we are experiencing when we're faced with stress. What we're able to cope with or tolerate is greatly reduced, causing us to be thrown off a lot more frequently and by a lot less or triggers that might not be as impactful during non-stressful periods of time. So this framework also gives us insight into the well-being of the folks around us and invites us to notice where they might be at, right? If we notice that they seem to be thrown off by something that under regular circumstances might not seem to be as impactful, again, that could be another indicator or prompt for us to check in and see how they're doing. Our stress response can occur in 3 different stages. The stressor that triggers the alarm stage can be sudden or be by deliberately entering a stressful situation. In the first stage, we're prepared to react and our fight or flight response is activated. If the stressor is resolved in stage 2, our body can try to return to normal and engage in the process of repair. However, if we're navigating a stressor and it continues to go unresolved, that's when it can potentially reach a chronic stage. And that's when we notice more manifestation of physical signs and symptoms due to the breakdown and the impact that this can create within the body. Let's explore what can tip the balance in our capacity to tolerate stress and uncertainty. Having limited access to support and people who we can ask for help. Experiencing multiple stressors can exhaust our resources and coping due to the high demand that's being placed on them. Not having access to coping tools can affect our confidence level. It can also tip the balance if we have been navigating the same stress for an ongoing long period of time. We've explored what stress is, signs and symptoms, the window of tolerance, and how that affects our emotional regulation when it is wide versus when it is more narrow. Let's explore coping tools and strategies we can use to help us navigate uncertain times. We've talked about how sometimes when we experience stress, some of the signs and symptoms can send us into the future, which can be tricky because we don't have access to that information, right? We don't know what that picture is going to look like. Sometimes when there is an abundance of unknown or uncertainty within the present moment, we can try to fill the gaps this creates by traveling into the future within our minds. So our minds can be time machines. However, because our time machine isn't fully equipped, we can fill these gaps with our assumptions and our fears and become disconnected from the here and now. This can cause us to act in ways that align with this vision of the future, which we don't know is accurate. That can get us to acting in ways that respond to the worst case scenario as though it were true. Sometimes we can become stuck in either thoughts of the past or worries about the future. Why does this matter? Where are we going? When we become disconnected from the present, we lose our ability to notice what is happening in the here and now. And when we're experiencing uncertainty, that is what we're able to control. What we're able to control is the present moment. Now that we know what mental time traveling is, how do we interrupt that process? We do that through developing the skill of presence. This is a tool we can use when we notice ourselves time traveling to bring ourselves back to the present moment. The first part of this practice is developing the skill of presence. It's to practice notice. When you notice yourself experiencing those cues of time traveling, bring your attention back to your mind. This practice focuses on becoming curious. It's not a practice on analyzing. It's not a practice of being critical. It's really focused on being curious. Looking at the state of our mind and practicing to notice what the quality is like. For an example, are our thoughts clear? Are they really fast? Is it hard to focus? Is it kind of cloudy and muddled? The more we're able to pay attention to, the more we'll be able to notice. From notice, we're going to practice shifting our attention, using our awareness to something that's anchored in the present moment. This could be something we hear, something we feel, or something we see within our physical surroundings that engages our senses. Continuing with this practice will help build new neural pathways, which changes how the brain does things automatically. Rewiring involves really immersing ourselves in this alternative experience of being present, and this is how we interrupt time travel. Let's move into our emotions. Our emotions are powerful, and they can teach us about what we want more in our lives. They can reveal when our needs have not been met, and they can also let us know when our boundaries have been crossed. Our emotions also help us take action when we need for survival. When we're navigating stress and uncertainty, what triggers us? So again, returning to those things that we can see, that we can hear, we can smell, or even think, that can be quite different, again, compared to when we're in a period or place of calmness and predictability. This can also be reflected in the emotions that we feel. The ability to recognize our emotions can help us understand what are our capabilities and limitations and how this can change, especially when moving through uncertain times. It might be more reduced compared to non-stressful periods of time, and that's okay, right? That also might not be everyone's experience. There might be some folks whose capacity remains the same. It can also be helpful to be able to recognize our triggers, and sometimes this process might be retracing our steps, so really looking backwards from our emotions to try to identify, what did I see, or what did I hear or smell or think that was my trigger? Now we're going to explore emotion regulation and how it can help us navigate our emotions. Emotion regulation describes our ability to manage and respond to an emotional experience. Sometimes the intensity of our emotions can disconnect us from what it is trying to teach us, tell us, or trying to guide us towards. Emotion regulation helps to turn down the intensity so we can still experience the emotion. Again, we're not trying to change it, and we're not trying to avoid the emotion with this practice. What we're trying to do is to access what it's trying to tell us. That might be what our unmet needs are, again, or our boundaries that have been crossed, or something that we might want more of within our lives. We can engage in actions to help manage our emotions, either before we feel the urge to do something, remembering that our emotions prompt us to act, right? Or after we've begun to react emotionally, using emotion regulation skills. Emotion regulation skills can help us respond to our emotions through focusing on slowing down the moment, because emotions can happen really fast. The skill of stop can help engage this practice. Acting from our emotions can disconnect us from what our needs are and from the consequences of our actions. Taking a moment to breathe can be like pushing the pause button, and it can help slow down this process because of the space that it creates between our emotion and that urge to take action. This space can help us reflect on our triggers. It can help us reflect on ways to cope within the moment, and it can help us move forward and respond from a place of regulation or balance. Slowing down also gives us the time and the space to reflect on what to do next, because that can be difficult to think about, right in that moment, right on that spot. It can also be helpful to notice if there are any signs that you're experiencing that might guide you to what you're feeling, right? That might look like checking in, noticing, is there anything that you're feeling within your stomach? Is your stomach upset? Is your heart racing? Are you noticing any signs of tension within your shoulders, within your head, within your neck? And then inviting curiosity to explore, are these any signs of stress for you, or are they connected to a specific emotion for you? To help us understand what is going on and what options are available, we're going to practice observing what is going on within us, as well as what is going on around us. This can allow us to move forward from a place of reflection, calmness, and control, and with clarity of what our needs are. It's important to remember that this skill isn't about criticizing or evaluating our emotions. It's about staying open and accepting the emotions that come up for us. There aren't any bad emotions. All emotions can teach us something about ourselves and what we need. And when we're navigating stress, it can help reveal to us the areas we could use extra support in. All emotions activate us to respond, which is biologically wired within us. Remember when we explored the stress response, and when we're faced with the stressor, it can engage our fight or flight response, right? So that's a biological response that is focused on our survival, which prepares us to either fight or to flee. Opposite action allows us to choose to respond in an opposite way to what our biological response would tell us to do. How we practice this is through switching it up. Our biological response can come from a place of protection. However, at the same time, it can also create further emotional dysregulation or keep us from being able to respond or manage our emotions in ways that are helpful. Opposite action focuses on challenging what our biology dictates we should do. Some of these examples can be counterintuitive to what we might feel in the moment, right? When we're experiencing stress, for example, we might notice an urge to withdraw or isolate from others. So in that instance, practicing the opposite action would look like leaning into our connections, leaning into those supports, connecting with others to challenge this biological response. In continuing to explore coping strategies, when we're stressed about something, it can be hard to look away sometimes. We might experience the urge to access all the information, everything that we can to know about our stressor in an attempt to regain control. By identifying and reducing our triggers, we can shift our attention to what we know. For example, this could look like reducing exposure to the news during vulnerable times of the day, for an example, like right before bedtime. Through observing the story we are telling ourselves, we can explore as well whether it's based in fact or whether it's based in fear. Another coping strategy is being mindful of how we talk to ourselves and practicing kindness and compassion within our self-dialogue. Slowing down the moment can allow us to hold space for what feelings show up during uncertainty and validate the spectrum of this experience. Sometimes how we respond in the moment might feel good and create consequences that are painful. Creating space to reflect on how we want to respond from a place of choice can be powerful and help us create alignment with our intentions. It can also be helpful to reflect on how you moved through stressful events in the past. Reflecting on what you did during those times that was effective and what you might like to try or maybe do differently. This gives us insight into tools that we have and know work for us and can help increase our confidence in navigating stressors. Establishing routines can also create structure, which can provide comfort through the predictability it can create, as well as give us a sense of control. Emotions and energy. Emotions can carry an energetic charge or energy that can help increase or drain our own. This invites us to notice what the emotional energy is like within us and around us. It can give us information about how our capabilities fluctuate based on what our energy levels are like and what changes might help increase it. We might notice that when we're in a place of stress, we might not have access to an abundance of energy. And there are ways through tuning in that we can practice energizing ourselves. During stressful times, it can help increase our energy through building awareness of what is contributing to our drain or depletion and determining the source. This can allow us to explore ways we can reduce exposure to things that drain us and create room for more positive energy to enter our lives. How do we energize ourselves during times of uncertainty? Through the practice of tuning in. The practice of tuning in invites ways of being in our emotions through engagement in reflection, paying attention to the body, and engaging in movement. Feeling and being in your emotions, that might come naturally to some folks, or it might take practice, right? Let's remember that both experiences are okay. When we're navigating stress or uncertainty, it's important to honor the change in our capacity and energy levels. Going back to the window of tolerance, where we explored what happens when our wide optimal zone becomes more narrow, which again impacts what can kind of throw us off balance. Learning how to say no, as well as creating and upholding our boundaries, can help honor the energy that is accessible to us. Let's move on in our exploration of coping tools to an anchor and how this tool can help us find steadiness. We know that an anchor is a heavy piece of metal that keeps a ship steady and in the same place when it's needed. Why do we need anchors? Well, when a storm hits and a boat is by itself at shore, it would drift in any which direction that the storm takes it. It has no control of where it's going. It has no control of where it's going to end up. And it has no control of when the storm will be over or if it's going to make it that far. That is where anchors come in. Anchors can come to the rescue and hold us in place, reminding us that the storm will pass. By being aware of who or what our anchors are, this allows us to know that when we are faced with the unknown, uncertainty, or stress, there will be something for us to hold on to. So an anchor can be a person or it can be a thing that provides stability or confidence during a changing and uncertain time. Your anchor is unique to you and it belongs to you. Our anchors can also change over time. A neat thing about anchors is that they're mobile and they can travel with us, right? Wherever we go to help provide a sense of grounding, a sense of center. It can help settle us whenever we need it to. When navigating uncertainty or the unknown, our anchors can show us the way to face them. The answer to these questions can help identify as well what is within your control, as well as what we need to accept is not during uncertain times. So we know what an anchor is and how to find them. How do we nurture them? That is through anchoring habits, which allows us to tend to different elements of our well-being. Our spiritual well-being allows us to explore how grounded and connected we feel within ourselves, as well as with the world. Our physical well-being focuses on taking care of the needs of our body. Our intellectual well-being looks at opportunities to stretch our thinking and to stimulate the mind. Our relational well-being looks at access to community with shared values of communication, conflict resolution, boundary setting, and mutual respect for some examples. Our emotional well-being focuses on being aware of your limit, knowing when to press pause, as well as knowing when to seek support. So we've come to the end of our exploration into coping regulation skills and coping tools to help us find our anchors, regulate our emotions, and find steadiness. From the stability that has been created, how do we use all of that to create what's next? We can achieve this through looking at how to find opportunity amidst uncertainty. Instead of seeing uncertainty as a closed door, could it be a fork in the road? Can uncertainty lead to the opening of new doors or doors that we haven't envisioned? Revisiting the prompts of how to find your anchor then invites you to reflect on your values, the person you want to be, what brings you joy or fuels your passion, can be helpful in creating this vision. This information can help fill the gaps of the unknown with intention and with direction. We can also find opportunity through cultivating certainty. By being able to focus on what is within our control and shifting our focus from what is lost from uncertainty to what is gained can increase certainty within our lives. Some other ways we can achieve this is through making the time to tend to our wellness, creating structure within our schedule, visualizing ourselves thriving and being successful, maybe taking the next step on a decision we have been contemplating. These strategies can help shift our mindset from loss to an opportunity of gain. Let's put it all together. We know that uncertainty can be an uncomfortable experience for some. And by shifting our perspectives to the positives that uncertainty presents, it can create more room for opportunity. We discuss tools as well as strategies to help move through the emotions we experience and create space to reflect on how we want to move forward from a place of choice, as well as in being anchored to the direction we want to create in our future. The tools and strategies we explored can challenge those barriers and that sense of stuckness that unhealthy coping can create, and it can keep us flexible through the safety and security that healthy coping can provide. This also allows us to challenge that worst case scenario picture and set boundaries that prevent our awareness from being hijacked or cause us to react in ways as though the worst case scenario is actually happening. By visualizing ourselves thriving and being successful, that allows us to connect with our resiliency and find meaning and find hope. In our exploration of wellness, I wanted to spend some time looking at how to create a safe space to engage in collective care. I know we discussed the signs and symptoms of stress and how we can keep those cues on our radar to check in on our well-being, as well as the well-being of our peers, our friends, our staff, and our students. Sometimes it might be counterintuitive to lean in and connect with others during times of stress for support. However, sometimes we need extra help or to be in connection with others. It can be impactful when we are navigating stress to have access to supportive relationships and community that allows us to experience a sense of acceptance and belonging. Supportive and caring connections with others can help us manage stress as well as improve our ability to respond with flexibility to challenging situations. We can access the stability of these relationships through ensuring the presence of physical and psychological safety, creating a space that encourages and is respectful of opinions, ideas, and different experiences. We can communicate that these experiences matter by having these conversations or engagements in spaces that allow for privacy, confidentiality, as well as accessible entry and exits. In addition, working to cultivate a space where there is non-judgment, compassion, and again, the presence of respect. In creating a safe space, it is important to recognize individual needs for time and space to share vulnerable parts or experiences. We all carry our own experiences of how we express our emotions, and this might still feel vulnerable at times, even within supportive relationships. So it's important to remind folks that you're there for them and not on your timeline, but on theirs. It's important to acknowledge that safety might be different for folks with multiple identities due to the unsafe experiences they've had and how they are continued to be treated in ways that are harmful. We need to give these folks the time they need to establish trust and share vulnerabilities, and when they're prepared to do so, and validate their experiences when they do. We can work to create empowerment through respecting access to choice and allow folks to be active and take the lead in decision making, knowing that when navigating the unknown, an opportunity it can reveal is the ability to create our own paths forward. And it is important in practicing collective care to honor each individual's choice and what that path looks like and where it will lead. So now I wanted to take a moment to revisit some key items and some key takeaways that I hope folks can keep in their back pocket or keep in their on their consciousness, or in some way, shape, or form keep with them. Our emotions can change throughout the course of the day, and I invite you to practice noticing if there are any signs or symptoms of stress you observe within yourself or within others, and using that information to take a step back to focus on your wellness or to support others with their own. Remember that your anchors go where you are and that you have access to this mobile tool wherever you go. Notice where you are in your mind and practice using the skill of presence when you notice yourself time traveling. Shift your focus to opportunities and what you can gain and the doors that open during times that are uncertain. Lastly, give yourself grace. Be kind with yourself. If you experience responding from an emotion, remembering that this is all a practice and the end goal is not perfection. Okay, so we've reached the end of our presentation today, and I would like to invite any of our attendees who have any questions that have come up for them so far to pop those in the chat. And yeah, and I'll do my best to get to as many as I can. Okay. All right, I see one question about how the webinar addresses the general stress management as well as catering to specific issues faced by college staff. So this webinar speaks to, again, how we can help manage stress in a general sense. It doesn't necessarily focus on specific triggers or specific stressors. A lot of the coping tools and strategies can be applied to a multitude of different experiences, a multitude of different sources of stress. It can be also applied to our interpersonal interactions and relationships if that's something we notice causes us to experience stress. If that helps. Okay. Just checking in case there are any other folks who might have any questions. Okay. Okay. All right. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to attend our webinar. I hope you found the information useful. If anything comes up, this is our contact. So if you're reflecting on the information later on and something comes up, there's a question, there's anything that you might want further elaboration on, please don't hesitate to reach out. This is where you can find us. Thank you again. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you all in this webinar, and I hope everyone has a really great rest of the day. Thank you.